Hello and happy Friday. Welcome to Firstpost America. I'm Eric Hammond. We're live in the nation's capital of Washington, D.C. And over the next few minutes, we'll take you from the United States and around the world, covering all the top stories of the day. But before that, let's take a look at the latest headlines. President Donald Trump calls the U.S.-Japan alliance, quote, unequal and unfair, end quote, and questions why the security pact includes American troops defending Japan, but not the other way around. The Philippines signed a defense pact with Canada as tensions with China continue to grow in the South China Seas. The new agreement allows the Philippines and Canada to deploy their troops on each other's soil. The Sudanese government files a case against the UAE at the International Court of Justice, accusing the Gulf nation of arming paramilitary rapid support groups and violating the Geneva Genocide Convention. The UAE calls the accusations baseless. Australia to postpone its national election scheduled for April, with tropical cyclone Alfred expected to make landfall tomorrow. Officials evacuate thousands from their homes as strong winds and heavy rain leads to power failures and airport shutdowns. And Brazil shuts down schools, offices, and businesses in at least 5 southern cities amid a severe heat wave. This as the region sees temperatures soar to 98 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 9 degrees more than normal for the month of March. We begin here in Washington, where President Donald Trump announced that he intends to travel to Saudi Arabia next month. The commander-in-chief said his team is still setting up a meeting with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, and that official dates would be announced once the meeting is confirmed. When asked if this was part of his plan to hold talks with Vladimir Putin, President Trump said the visit will be about striking a $1 trillion business deal with the Saudi kingdom and not about Russia.
I don't know. I can't tell you. I'm going to Saudi Arabia.
Mr. President,
I've made a deal with Saudi Arabia where, because normally you'd go to UK first, and last time I went to Saudi Arabia, they put up $450 billion. You know that, right? You were there. We had American companies that took in $450 billion. I said, well, this time they've gotten richer. We've all gotten older. So I said, I'll go if you pay $1 trillion, $1 trillion to American companies, meaning the purchase over a 4-year period of $1 trillion. And they've agreed to do that. So I'm going to be going there, and I have a great relationship with them, and they've been very nice. But they're going to be spending a lot of money to American companies for buying military equipment and a lot of other things.
Now, White House officials have been in talks with the Kremlin to host a possible meeting between President Trump and Vladimir Putin in Saudi Arabia. In fact, last month, Secretary of State Marco Rubio met his Russian counterpart in Saudi Arabia's capital, Riyadh. The oil-rich kingdom has become the go-to destination for both Washington and Moscow to hold discussions about ending the war in Ukraine. But now the Trump administration wants to go a step further and hold talks with Ukrainian counterparts in Saudi Arabia as well. A stark contrast with how Ukrainian allies were in fact welcomed in Washington during President Joe Biden's term. In the latest development, President Trump's Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff has been dispatched to Saudi Arabia to arrange the meetings.
Well, President Zelensky sent a letter to the president. I think the president thought that it was a really good, positive first step. And from that, we're now in discussions to coordinate a meeting with the Ukrainians in Riyadh or even potentially Jeddah. So the city's moving around a little bit, but it will be Saudi Arabia. And I think the idea is to get down a framework for a peace agreement and an initial ceasefire as well.
Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has announced that he too will travel to Riyadh this weekend and will meet the Saudi Crown Prince on Monday. President Zelensky is also expected to meet Steve Witkoff to finalize a peace agreement framework and an initial ceasefire between President Trump's visit to the Gulf Kingdom. Now it's also unclear whether Saudi Arabia will in fact commit to investing $1 trillion as advertised by President Trump. However, the commander-in-chief does have good relations with the Saudi crown prince, who is looking to rebuild ties with the United States. Turning to Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's political swan song event became an emotional farewell as his country stands on the edge of a financial crisis. The Canadian leader got emotional while addressing members of the Liberal Party. Now, this all comes as the Prime Minister and the nation has been locked in a heated trade war with President Trump and the U.S. over high tariffs inflicted by the White House. As the Liberal Party prepares to elect a new leader on Sunday, scars of Prime Minister Trudeau's fight against President Trump still linger. But with rumors swirling of a political comeback, this story could be far from over. Our next report dives into Canada's uncertain future.
Justin Trudeau's political empire came crashing down on Thursday. It wasn't with a triumphant farewell, but one with tears. The outgoing Prime Minister stood at a podium in Ottawa with tears in his eyes, announcing that he always put Canadians first. And no matter what, he will not let them down.
I've made sure that every single day in this office, I put Canadians first, that I have people's backs. And that's why I'm here to tell you all that we got you. Even in the very last days of this government, we will not let Canadians down today and long into the future.
Trudeau's misery comes after he managed to evade a trade war with his southern neighbors. On Tuesday, Donald Trump slapped 25% tariffs on all goods from Canada and Mexico, sending Ottawa and Mexico City into shock. But in true Trump style, this was just his way of spooking the two neighbors as he withdrew his tariffs again, only to threaten Canada with more tariffs starting April 2nd.
Other countries have used tariffs against us for decades, and now it's our turn to start using them against those other countries. On average, the European Union, China, Brazil, India, Mexico and Canada, have you heard of them? And countless other nations charge us tremendously higher tariffs than we charge them.
The move sent Canadian markets into freefall, and Canada was left twisting in the wind.
The United States launched a trade war against Canada, their closest partner and ally, their closest friend. At the same time, they're talking about working positively with Russia, appeasing Vladimir Putin, a lying, murderous dictator. Make that make sense. Canadians are reasonable, and we are polite, but we will not back down from a fight. Not when our country and the well-being of everyone in it is at stake.
Now, Trudeau's hardships are not new. For months, Trump has toyed with Trudeau like a cat playing with a wounded mouse. He called him Governor Trudeau. He even floated the idea of making Canada the 51st state. And even though Trudeau tried to fight back, his every punch landed softer than the last.
We will stand up for Canadian workers, we will stand up for Canadian industries, and more Canadians will stand up for each other. We should be doing more together, not fighting with each other, but Canadians will stand up strongly and firmly if we need to.
When Trudeau broke down, the nation watched their leader in stunned silence. This was no statesman leaving on his own terms. This was a man pushed out the door, clinging to the frame. However, the war of social media on Prime Minister Trudeau was not silent. Mocking the Canadian leader, some pointed out how Trump made Trudeau cry, while others pointed out that he's not just the laughingstock of Canada, but the entire world. And there were some who even blamed him for ripping Canadians off and stealing their money. Now, it's no secret that Trump's tariff war has battered Canada's economy, with $412 billion worth of Canadian goods imported into the United States last year alone. Even though Trudeau tried to hit back, announcing 25% retaliatory tariffs on $155 billion worth of American goods, Trump's response was immediate: more tariffs, more pain.
The United States will be very strong with what's happening here. Now, these are countries and companies, foreign companies, that have been ripping us off, and no president did anything about it until I came along, and then I did a lot about it.
The numbers don't lie, but neither does the humiliation. And Trump's suggestion that Canada should simply become part of the US no longer feels like a joke.
I spoke to Governor Trudeau on numerous occasions, and we'll see what happens. But it just sets up so good for them. Look, the people would pay much less tax than they're paying right now. They'd have perfect military protection. They don't have any military protection because and you take a look at what's going on out there. You have Russian ships, you have China ships, you have Chinese ships, you have a lot of ships out there, and you know, people are in danger. This is a different world today. It's a different world. They need our protection.
Because for the first time, some Canadians wondered if life as the 51st state might just be better than life under Trudeau's crumbling leadership. As the Liberal Party prepares to crown a new leader, former Bank of Canada Chief Mark Carney leads the race. Chrystia Freeland, once Trudeau's right-hand woman, trails after breaking with him on Canada's fiscal direction. Over 400,000 Liberal members will cast their ballots, but the winner will inherit a nation battered, humiliated, and staring into the economic abyss. Trudeau's farewell is less a victory lap and more a slow, painful surrender. He fought Trump with platitudes, not power. He traded substance for slogans. And now, as he wipes away tears, the once golden boy of Canadian politics faces the final indignity. A legacy built not on triumph, but on failure.
And now moving to South America, in an unprecedented address to the nation, Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro threatened American oil giant ExxonMobil and the government of Guyana. Maduro called Exxon's oil exploration and oil extraction activities illegal, despite Exxon carrying out its operations in Guyana's territory. Maduro added that he would end all of Exxon's activities and remove their projects from the region.
Es absolutamente ilegal.
It is absolutely illegal, and Venezuela rejects and denounces it. We will take all actions to stop the illegal actions of ExxonMobil and the sellout government of Guyana. But the fascist, the criminal which supports ExxonMobil and the disastrous government of Guyana that has surrendered the sovereignty of the Guyanese people.
Now, it must be noted that ExxonMobil has an agreement with the Guyanese government for oil exploration and extraction, which is backed by the White House. The American oil giant has operations off the coast of Guyana, opposite a region called Essequibo, which is 2/3 of Guyana. However, Maduro claims that Essequibo is Venezuelan territory and has repeatedly threatened to annex the oil-rich region. Now, Exxon has been working with the Guyanese government since 2008. And the American oil giant has invested over $50 billion in the country, which includes 6 massive oil wells and dozens of oil exploration sites. Exxon also pays Guyana 2% royalty for the total oil that's produced and sold in a year. Guyana and Exxon generated nearly $7 billion in the year 2023, out of which nearly half went to Exxon. In fact, Exxon's operations have allowed Guyana to become one of the major contributors to the global crude supply chain. The Guyanese government has also announced a payout of $480 for all of its citizens owing to the surplus in cash. Now, Maduro, who repeatedly threatens the United States over sanctions, says that Washington unfairly favors what he calls the fascist government of Guyana.
¿Qué hizo la fascista?
And what did the fascist and fascism do here and in Miami? They celebrated the sanctions against Chevron because they see it as a blow against Venezuela. That's why I support the overwhelming and majority sentiment of the Venezuelan people in rejecting the new sanctions from the U.S. government.
Now, earlier this month, the Venezuelan Navy entered Guyana's waters and approached an Exxon oil exploration facility, forcing Guyana to deploy air and naval assets to counter the threat. Washington is already miffed with Maduro for his political power grab, and the White House refuses to accept Maduro's re-election for a 3rd term. To date, the United States has not sought to escalate tensions with Venezuela, but one thing is unmistakably clear. There is no love lost between Caracas and Washington. And moving to Syria now, over 70 people were killed and dozens more wounded as fighting broke out between the Syrian government forces and militants loyal to deposed ruler Bashar al-Assad. Videos show heavy gunfire in what has been the most violent attack against the new authorities since the Assad regime was toppled in December.
We, the administration of General Security in Aleppo Governorate, are heading to the coastal areas to defeat the remnants of al-Assad that targeted the brothers in the General Security Administration in Latakia Governorate.
The bloody clashes erupted in the port city of Latakia when government forces were ambushed during a security operation. At least 48 out of the 70 were killed in the coastal town of Jableh, where clashes were also reported in the cities of Homs and Aleppo. Tensions escalated after 4 civilians were found to be among those killed in the security operation in Latakia. A curfew has now been imposed in the port cities of Latakia, Tartus, and Homs. Now the clashes have erupted in Syria's coastal region, which is in the heartland of the Alawite minority, who are supporters of the Assad family. The region has become a major security challenge for the interim Syrian president who oversaw Assad's removal. Alawite activists say their community has been subjected to violence and attacks by pro-government forces, while the administration refuses to provide any relief.
This region needs services in this area. We propose to activate the central institutions for the service of the citizens. Now there are requests from the citizens to activate them. Therefore, this is Damascus's responsibility to play this role to reach the final solutions and not to hinder the services of the society.
Because of the events that happened, all governmental institutions were closed. I'm not the only one who suffered damage, but a big percentage of citizens in Hasaka were harmed because of the closure of these institutions. We hope that these institutions become neutral, and that an agreement takes place between the new government and Syrian Democratic Forces and the autonomous administration to open these institutions because they are made to serve this society.
Syria's new security forces have carried out extensive campaigns seeking to root out Assad loyalists. Meanwhile, residents and activists have reported violations during these campaigns, including field executions and kidnappings. Calling these violations isolated incidents, Syria's new government has now vowed to pursue those responsible. And finally, in Europe, Poland, led by Prime Minister Donald Tusk, is locking horns with the European Union over its migration pact. The agreement, designed to share the burden of asylum seekers, now faces rebellion from a nation stretched by geopolitical crisis. Prime Minister Tusk's defiance echoes nationalist waves, just like President Trump's crackdown on illegal migrants in the United States. Our final story brings you more.
Poland's refusal to implement the European Union's migration pact mirrors global nationalist surges. And the European Commission remains silent on legal action, avoiding a brewing showdown. The EU pact, hailed as a historic breakthrough, seeks to manage asylum seekers collectively. Yet Poland's defiance threatens its implementation before it even begins. Prime Minister Donald Tusk, who casts himself as Poland's protector, has made it clear migrants will be deported.
I have made a decision and asked the Minister of the Interior and Administration and the Minister of Justice to put forward a rapid plan for an immediate response to organized crime and violent crime by foreigners. Anyone who is hosted in Poland, takes advantage of our hospitality, and violates the law in a violent manner will be deported from Poland.
His hardline stance mirrors Donald Trump's anti-migrant crusade in America. Both leaders tap into nationalist fears, transforming migration into a political weapon. And this narrative appeals to citizens who view migrants as a threat to security and cultural identity. Drawing a red line, Tusk declared, Poland will not accept additional burdens, full stop. Because Poland faces dual pressures: Ukrainian refugees and Belarusian manipulation. The war in Ukraine has driven millions into Poland seeking temporary shelter. At the same time, Belarus weaponizes migration by funneling irregular migrants across Poland's eastern border. These crises have stretched Poland's resources, making the country reluctant to shoulder more responsibility.
The situation has changed in the last few months. As what I have already mentioned during the press briefing, we currently have fewer illegal attempts to cross the border itself. And the second thing is that it's for a few weeks when it comes to aggression from migrants. I will tell you that even the last few days, 3 or 4 days in a row when there are 0 border crossings.
It was September, October, were the most aggressive, and I don't even know if they were immigrants, if they were not simply people whose task was to discourage our soldiers, or simply to overpower soldiers, or to instill fear among soldiers. They used, among other things, slingshots with steel balls. There were used dangerous, sharp tools thrown over the fence.
Despite these pressures, the EU Pact offers 3 options: hosting asylum seekers, paying financial contributions, or providing operational support. The solidarity mechanism aims to distribute burdens fairly across member states. However, Poland rejects all options, framing the pact as forced compliance, and Tusk's defiance fuels nationalist sentiment, rallying voters who fear cultural dilution. His rhetoric taps into a growing European movement, prioritizing sovereignty over shared responsibility. However, the European Commission's silence speaks volumes about their unity. Other nations, especially Hungary led by Prime Minister Viktor Orbán, have expressed similar resistance. Germany's recent election too saw the growing popularity of the far-right AfD party, who promised to close down German borders for asylum seekers. And if Poland's defiance goes unchallenged, other nations too could back out. The pact's credibility could crumble because the pact's success hinges on cooperation. With implementation set for 2026, tensions simmer beneath the surface. Poland's rebellion reveals a deeper struggle, national identity clashing with shared European obligations. The EU must navigate this minefield carefully. If the Commission missteps, the pact could unravel even before it begins. Poland's hardline stance may reshape Europe's future as the continent faces a critical test: unity or fragmentation in the face of one of its most pressing challenges.
That's First Post America for this Friday. I'm Eric Ham signing off from our studios in Washington, D.C. Have a great weekend, everyone.